14th of June they all landed without opposition. After a continued series of engagement and skirmishes, the army got within cannon shot of Algiers, where they broke ground and began entrenching, and the French works being completed, the heavy breaching cannon were all mounted, and at daybreak on the 4th of July, General Lahitte, having assured himself by personal inspection that all was ready, ordered the signal rocket to be thrown, and at the same moment the whole French batteries opened their fire within point-blank distance, and with a report which shook the whole of Algiers and brought the garrison, who were little expecting so speedy an attack, running to their posts. The artillery was admirably served, and from one battery which enfiladed the fort, the balls were seen to sweep away at once an entire row of Algerine cannoneers from their guns. The Turks displayed the most undaunted courage. They answered shot for shot, supplied with fresh men in the places of such as were slain, stopped up with woolsacks the breaches made by the balls, replaced the cannon which the French fire had dismounted, and never relaxed their exertions for a moment. But the nature of their works was ill calculated to withstand the scientific accuracy with which the besiegers made their attack. Every ball now told, the tower in the center was completely riddled by shots and shells. The bursting of these latter had disabled great numbers of the garrison. By 7 o'clock the besieged had begun to retire from the most damaged part of their works. By 8:30 the whole outer line of defense was abandoned, and by 9 the fire of the fort was extinct. The Turkish general, finding opposition hopeless, had sent to the Dey for commands, and in reply was ordered to retreat with his whole remaining force to Cassaubah, and leave 3 negroes to blow up the fort. The tranquillity with which they performed the fatal task deserves record. The French, finding the enemy's fire to fail, directed all theirs toward effecting a practicable breach. The fort seemed to be abandoned. 2 red flags floated still on its outside line of defense, and a third on the angle towards the city. 3 negroes were seen calmly walking on the ramparts, and from time to time looking over, as if to examine what the progress the breach was making. One of them, struck by a cannon ball, fell, and the others, as if to revenge his death, ran to a cannon, pointed it, and fired 3 shots. At the third the gun turned over, and they were unable to replace it. They tried another, and as they were in the act of raising it, a shot swept the legs from under one of them. The remaining negro gazed for a moment at his comrade, drew him a little back, left him, and once more examined the breach. He then snatched one of the flags and retired to the interior of the tower. In a few minutes he reappeared, took a second, and descended. The French continued to cannonade, and the breach appeared almost practicable, when suddenly they were astounded by a terrific explosion, which shook the whole ground as with an earthquake. An immense column of smoke, mixed with streaks of flame, burst from the center of the fortress. Masses of solid masonry were hurled into the air to an amazing height, while cannon, stones, timbers, projectiles, and dead bodies were scattered in every direction. The negro had done his duty. The fort was blown up. In half an hour the French sappers and miners were at work repairing the smoking ruins. Their advanced guards had effected a reconnaissance along the side of the hill towards the fort Babazouna, and their engineers had broken ground for new works within 700 yards of the Cassaubah. But these preparations were unnecessary. The Dey had resigned all further intention of resistance, and at 2 o'clock a flag of truce was announced, which proved to be Sidi Mustapha, the Dey's private secretary, charged with offers of paying the whole expense of the campaign, relinquishing all his demands on France, and making any further reparation that the French general might require, on condition that the troops should not enter Algiers. These proposals met with an instant negative. Bourmont felt that Algiers was in his power, and declared that he would grant no other terms than an assurance of life to the Dey and inhabitants, adding that if the gates were not opened he should recommence his fire. Scarcely had Mustapha gone, than 2 other deputies appeared, sent by the townsmen to plead in their behalf. They were a Turk called Omar, and a Moor named Boudourbeh, and who, having lived for some time at Marseilles, spoke French perfectly. They received nearly the same answer as Mustapha, but they proved themselves better diplomatists, for they spoke so much to the general of the danger there would be in refusing the Janissaries all terms, and the probability that if thus driven to despair they might make a murderous resistance, and afterwards destroy all the wealth and blow up all the forts before surrendering, that Bourmont, yielding to their representations, became less stern in his demands, and Mustapha, having returned about the same time with the English vice-consul as a mediator, the following terms were finally committed to paper, and sent to the Dey by an interpreter. 1. The fort of the Cassaubah, with all the other forts dependent on Algiers and the harbor, shall be placed in the hands of the French troops the 5th of July at 10 o'clock a.m. 2. The General-in-Chief of the French army ensures the Dey of Algiers personal liberty and all his private property. 3. The Dey shall be free to retire with his family and wealth wherever he pleases. While he remains at Algiers, he and his family shall be under the protection of the Commander-in-Chief. A guard shall ensure his safety and that of his family. 4. The same advantages and same protection are assured to all the soldiers of the militia. 5. The exercise of the Mohammedan religion shall remain free. The liberty of the inhabitants of all classes, their religion, property, commerce, and industry shall receive no injury. Their women shall be respected. The general takes this on his own responsibility. 6. The ratification of this convention to be made before 10 a.m. on the 5th of July, and the French troops immediately after to take possession of the Cassaubah and other forts. These terms were so much more favorable than the Dey could have expected that, of course, not a moment was lost in signifying his acceptance. He only begged to be allowed 2 hours more to get himself and his goods out of the Cassaubah, and these were readily granted. It may indeed be wondered at that he and his janissaries should be allowed to retain their ill-gotten booty under the name of private property, but Count de Bourmont, though not without talent, was essentially a weak man, and was in this instance overreached by the wily Moor. The whole of next morning an immense number of persons were seen flying from Algiers, previous to the entry of the French army, and carrying with them all their goods, valuables, and money. They fled by the fort Babazouna on the roads towards Constantina and Blida, and about 100 mounted Arabs were seen caracoling on the beach, as if to cover their retreat. No opposition to it, however, was made by the French troops, or by their navy, which had now again come into sight. At 12 o'clock the general, with his staff, artillery, and a strong guard, entered the Cassaubah, and at that same moment all the other forts were taken possession of by French troops. No one appeared to make a formal surrender, nor did any one present himself on the part of the inhabitants to inquire as to what protection they were to receive. Yet, on the whole, we believe the troops conducted themselves, at least on this occasion, with signal forbearance, and that of the robberies which took place, the greater number were perpetrated by Moors and Jews. One was rather ingenious. The Minister of Finance had given up the public treasures to commissioners regularly appointed for the purpose. Amongst others, the mint was visited, a receipt given of its containing bullion to the amount of 25,000 or 30,000 francs, the door sealed, and a sentry placed. Next morning the seal was perfect, the sentry at his post, but the bullion had gone through a small hole made in the back wall. The amount of public property found in Algiers and appropriated by the French was very considerable, and much more than repaid the expenses of the expedition. The blockade of the last 3 years had, by interrupting their commerce, caused an accumulation of the commodities in which the Algerines generally paid their tribute, so that the storehouses at the Cassaubah were abundantly filled with wool, hides, leather, wax, lead, and copper. Quantities of grains, silks, muslins, and gold and silver tissues were also found, as well as salt, of which the Dey had reserved to himself a monopoly, and by buying it very cheap at the Balearic Isles, used to sell it at an extravagant rate to his subjects. The treasure alone amounted to nearly 50 millions of francs, and the cannon, projectiles, powder magazines, and military stores, together with the public buildings, foundries, dockyards, and vessels in the harbor, were estimated at a still larger amount, while the entire expense of the expedition, including land and sea service, together with the maintenance of an army of occupation of up to January 1831, was computed not to exceed 48,500,000 francs, so that France must have realized, by her first connection with Algiers, a sum not far short of 3 millions sterling, a larger amount, we will venture to say, than is likely to accrue to her again, even after many years of colonization. In a few days the Dey had embarked for Naples, which he chose as his future place of residence. The janissaries were sent in French vessels to Constantinople. The Bey of Tipperary made his submissions and swore allegiance to the French king. Orders were issued, and laws enacted in his name. The Arabs and Kailis came into market as usual with their fowl and game. A French soldier was tolerably safe as long as he avoided going to any distance beyond the outposts, and, on the whole, Algiers the warlike had assumed all the appearance of a French colony. End of chapter 27. Recording by Laura Christ, Louisville, Kentucky.